And right here, in the centre of suburban Sydney, a group of dedicated people are making sure we all have healthy bush to enjoy.
So we're going to go down the track, and on both sides you will find the usual little uglies which will have to be taken out.
They're called the Knife and Fork Gang. Their mission? To uproot exotic outlaws that are taking over our native bush. They're the good guys in a fight for natural justice. The volunteers carefully extricate the weeds from the natives, making sure they don't disturb the soil, because that just creates a bed for new weeds. It requires skill and a keen eye. Former stockbroker David Jenkinson explains his tactics to a greenhorn.
Which is a native plant.
They look exactly the same to me. How can you tell the difference?
Well, this here
Yes.
is wandering Jew or trad.
Yeah.
That has a white flower. It flowers in springtime, whereas this one here is a native.
Now, how can you tell the difference between those leaves?
Well, it's probably more by experience than anything else. You can tell from the leaves. The leaves are usually a little bit lusher than the native, and the stems on the native are wiry. Also, they have a small amount of colour in there.
But even for the experts, it's not always easy.
Tony,
Yes.
did we decided that this is a weed or a native at this stage? This cypress sedge?
Well, has it got a triangular stem or a round stem? Your eyes can feel it with my... I've got a glove on. Yes, well, I think that's an out. I think that's Cyprus congestus.
Righto, it's a nasty side. She comes.
Given care and half a chance, these small native grasses will thrive and reproduce. It's quite different from what we do in our own backyards.
Gardening at home, I suppose, is virtually clear felling. You get rid of everything you've got and you start again and you plant in your mostly introduced species. And this causes you to be tied down to a life of maintenance. You've got to constantly weed and prune and water and fertilise and mulch and all that sort of thing. Whereas with the Bradley method of bush regeneration, you're maintaining a natural ecosystem.
The Bradley method is named after its founders, Joan and Eileen. Until their deaths, the sisters worked together to regenerate a small patch of bush near their home in suburban Sydney.
Well, it's essentially a program of helping the natives to battle the weeds. And the way in which we do this is we don't start where the weeds are worst, we start where the weeds are thinnest and work our way from the bush towards the weeds. The direction of weeding is probably the most essential thing about it. Why? Because if you start where the weeds are worst and work towards the bush, you bring the weeds with you. If you do it the opposite way, you bring the bush with you. You both find it satisfying work. Gorgeous. Immensely satisfying, yes.
These were radical views for the time, and many dismissed them as eccentric. But as the results of the sisters' efforts became obvious, others were gradually converted. And it really caught on when councils discovered it was cost-effective. Local bodies were using labour-intensive and expensive methods of weed clearing. It had looked good for a while, but within 6 months, the same bunch of weeds would be back again, worse than before. By contrast, the Bradley method means after a few weedings, the natives maintain themselves and begin to spread. Birds, animals and insects return to the flourishing bush, to the delight of the regenerators.
I think it's worth doing because if it looks beautiful, people treat it as valuable. If it looks like garbage, people treat it like garbage. When I started identifying plants, I hadn't known that there were 4,000 different species of plants growing in the Sydney sandstone region. And so learning about those has been really exciting.
I love it. It's hard to explain, really, what you get out of it. It's a personal thing, but I also feel that it's extremely important to keep these areas of urban bushland as a habitat for native birds and animals, and also to provide people with an opportunity to see a little bit of the natural world right on their doorstep.
I have 3 children, and I'd like to make sure that there's something left for them to enjoy the same as I've been fortunate to do it in my lifetime.
Lane Cove and other councils are paying the bush regenerators to clean up their local reserves. The method has become so widely accepted, it's now taught at TAFE colleges.
During this course, we're going to be looking at all forms of weed control, including the Bradley method. This little area I've selected here is ideal for the Bradley method.
The seeds of change were planted 30 years ago. Today, staff at Sydney's Taronga Zoo maintain the harbour foreshore close to where the sisters started. The Bradleys' love of nature has paid off, leaving us with native bush right in the heart of the urban landscape.